Hello, everybody. My name is Tag Warner. I'm the CEO of GAYTIMES. Welcome to our Amplifund update. And I'm very, very pleased to be joined by Claire from GiveOut and Amir Ashour from IraQueer. And I'll be introducing them both in a second. Just so that you're all aware, we're recording this evening's webinar, and we'll be sharing this across GAYTIMES' channels in the coming days for everybody to enjoy, and doing a few write-ups from today's event. It's the first time that we've done a digital event for Amplifund, so we're really excited to be here. Thank you for joining if you are joining us live, and if you're watching this at a later time, we hope you enjoy the next 45 minutes or so of conversation. So I wanted to start off by just quickly giving a quick summary of Amplifund and where it's come from, and our short history, if you like. Amplifund was founded in June 2019 on the idea of raising voices of queer people in different global environments. This was done in partnership with GiveOut as our charity underlying partner, and the partnership between GiveOut and GAYTIMES came together to create Amplifund, its mission, and of course the fund that then grants to different organizations today. We wanted to launch Amplifund, and I was specifically passionate about this last year because we wanted to try and change the way that we were giving grants and supporting LGBTQ people in different global environments. And that was all based on this idea that actually in the UK, where GAYTIMES is based, and we operate in the US as well, we don't always know, of course, the best way of how to do things. And we wanted to entrust people in our community around the world to do that in their own way and to speak to their own communities in their own voice. So instead of us talking at GAYTIMES about the experience of people in different environments in our community, we wanted to empower those individuals and those organizations themselves. At the same time, we also wanted to challenge how we here in the UK and in places like the US thought about people who lived in different global environments and thought about the LGBTQ experience. I think it's something that we can all kind of relate to. It was so clear to me that media especially could be so patronizing and condescending to the LGBTQ experience outside of the global north, and it always saw it as a struggle, as something that was negative, or as something that really didn't exist. When we first did the outreach and started talking to potential partners under Amplifund, we heard a completely different story. That, of course, sometimes the LGBTQ experiences were fraught with huge challenges, both legal and social. But at the same time, those communities were also fostering a sense of community, and they had something to talk about that was really positive, and they had a mission that they were working towards. So we launched, as I said, Amplifund last year in London in June 2019 with a real life person event, which of course feels very strange today. But we were together in real life, and a few hundred guests from the community came into central London in the middle of the summer. And since then, things have really taken off. We originally started supporting 3 different organizations. We've now expanded the different organizations and projects under Amplifund that we're looking to support and fund. But we've also been able to support them in different ways, not just through grant giving, but also through trying to raise and amplify their stories, either through content partnerships or with other specific content plans, like we'll be speaking to a little bit today, and Amir's going to be talking to you a bit about that soon. As I mentioned, it wasn't just about the partners and supporting them in their own countries outside of the UK and the US. It was also about us trying to re-educate our audience and also the wider public about LGBTQ experiences. So Amplifund also kicked off a wider campaign which includes billboards across the whole of the UK and across all UK press. So that included every single national newspaper. And those campaigns were all about challenging the perceptions of how we think about the LGBTQ experiences in other global territories. We centered those campaigns around the phrase, "It does happen, it can happen, it will happen," to try and show and challenge people of how they thought about the experiences of those LGBTQ people. As I said, these advertising campaigns were seen across different billboards and press to millions and millions of people. And we're so excited to be able to do that so that we could also get a positive and a more forward-thinking message into the wider public sphere and try and start changing the narrative from the, as I mentioned, the so frequently negative or slightly patronizing sort of tone that we often see in UK-based media about the experience of people in other environments. So that gives you a bit of an introduction to what Amplifund's about in our very, very busy first year. And I just thought I'd finish off before I go into a couple of updates and then introduce you to Claire to explain how Amplifund works in a more of a logistical capacity. It was really important to me when we were founding Amplifund that it wasn't just based on grant giving or donations from individuals. It was really baked into how GAYTIMES works as an organization. So it predominantly is funded in two ways. One is through the partners that we work with. GAYTIMES works with brands like Apple, Coca-Cola, and so we donate a percentage of all of the revenue from any of the work that we do with those organizations directly into the fund. It was really important for me that that was something that happened without our partners even having to ask us to do it, or even saying that they wanted to be a part of Amplifund. We just do it because we want to do it, and it's our decision, of course, to take part of that revenue and divert that into the fund. The second way is through originally what were GAYTIMES subscriptions. This year, of course, coronavirus has been something that has impacted us all in different ways. One of the ways it impacted us at GAYTIMES was that it accelerated one of the programs that we had to changing what has been a fairly old system of subscriptions that, of course, have existed for many decades now into our new offering called GAYTIMES Plus. And GAYTIMES Plus is a membership program for the LGBT community. What's really exciting beyond just subscriptions and what we could offer there, which is around the magazine, is that GAYTIMES Plus is all about having a wider conversation. We have members' webinars, surveys. We, of course, have content within it as well, and we have some really exciting updates coming soon for members as well. But GAYTIMES Plus is also available all around the world. And so 5% of all of GAYTIMES Plus members' dues every single month and year are also diverted into Amplifund. So members, again, are able to support what Amplifund is doing with no additional effort on their part. So I wanted to just to do a quick update on a couple of the organizations that we've supported over the last year. The first is JFlag, which is an activism organization based out in Jamaica. And JFlag is one of those first organizations that we partnered with. We've had a brilliant relationship with them that's built over the last year. And I just wanted to update you a little bit on what they've been doing, especially over the last year during coronavirus. So JFlag have been running regular sessions with their community around topics like catfishing. They've also been doing a Vote for Justice 2020 campaign and the healthcare system and the rights of LGBTQI Jamaicans. They've expanded their Out Loud JA project, which aims to build the capacity of LGBT Jamaicans and allies to share their lived experiences and speak on diverse social justice issues. They ran a campaign around the Jamaican election called Vote Justice 2020, which is really exciting, and they encourage political parties to come out in support of LGBTQI and other human rights. They've also celebrated their 5-year anniversary that we were able to celebrate in a small way also at GAYTIMES, with a series of various online events, virtual support groups, which is something I know again from the partners there is so important to their community, and they've been able to take that into a virtual capacity. And we also managed to tie up with JFlag last year to run a campaign in the UK about challenging how our audience sees the Jamaican Pride events, and to challenge again those preconceptions that we might have of what Pride should look like versus our own experiences and those experiences in other countries. The second update I'm going to give you is from Kaleidoscope Trust, which I'm sure many of you know a huge deal about. It's a fantastic organization. And at the start of the coronavirus crisis, Kaleidoscope Trust responded by conducting a consultation of members across the Commonwealth Equality Network in April 2020. They gathered testimonies from various different individuals from their 34 member organizations covering 37 Commonwealth countries to understand how LGBTI plus people, activists and civil organizations are being impacted by the coronavirus outbreak. They launched a report which provided a snapshot of some of the acute challenges that people in our community and communities across the Commonwealth are facing as a result of the pandemic. The Kaleidoscope Trust also established a way of donating towards delivering COVID-19 rapid relief interventions so that activists can continue to defend human rights of LGBTQI people around the world. Kaleidoscope Trust is an organization that's been so close to Gay Times for so long now, and longer than I've been here, but it's great to be able to bring them into the Amplifund family per se, and also to be able to grant money to Kaleidoscope Trust through Amplifund. So that gives you an update of kind of what we've been up to. It feels like a lot when you say it out loud, and there's still more to talk about. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce you to Claire from GiveOut, who's going to give you a quick update on some of the other projects that Amplifund's been involved with. So over to you, Claire.
Thanks, Tag. And hi, everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. As Tag mentioned, my name is Claire Tunnacliffe. I'm the Grant-Making Officer for GiveOut. And I'm just going to not only update you a bit more in depth for some of our grant partners, but I'm also going to give you a bit of an intro to GiveOut and also our grant-making processes, because as the grant-making officer, I do find this stuff quite interesting. Established in 2018, GiveOut is an award-winning human rights charity, growing giving to support the global struggle for LGBTQI rights. So the vision that really drives and shapes our grant making is a world where the human rights of LGBTQI people are respected. They are free to be who they are and love who they love without the threat of discrimination, persecution, harassment, or violence. And we specifically work to address the issue of underfunding in the movement by enabling individuals and businesses to give in one place before we distribute these pooled donations as grants to activist-led organizations, and therefore ensuring that they have more of the resources that they need to defend their communities and campaign for equality. So our grant making is really rooted in recommendations from a grant making advisory panel, snappily called GMAP, whose members ensure that our processes and grants are grounded in the advice and expertise of those who are active in the global LGBTQI movement. So the members are often themselves activists, and we primarily provide long-term, flexible course support with our grant partners, reflecting the diversity and complexity of the movement. At the heart of our grant making, for us, it's really central that the agency of activists is integral by providing resources and not strategies, and really focusing on amplifying their voices. So we've undertaken 2 grant cycles, and we now, in our second year, are supporting 24 partners around the world, as well as several one-off emergency grants in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we really strive to be representative of the movement as a whole. Year on year, our grant making has been closing this gap in terms of representation, and we prioritize trans, LGBTQ women, and intersex-led groups. And as we've heard from Tag, the Gay Times Amplifund specifically supports LGBTQI organizations in their campaigning and media work, under which actually 6 partners are currently supported. So in addition to IraQueer, which Amir will speak about momentarily, we have 5 further partners, though one works in a more sensitive and restricted context and therefore is going to remain anonymous. But Tag touched on 2 of the groups, JFlag and Kaleidoscope Trust. And there's 2 further groups, which I'd like to spend just a few moments updating you all on. So the first is the Arabic Media Project under Outright Action International. And they monitor local and national newspapers, radio stations, TV channels, social media in the MENA region, in the Middle East and North African region. And they also provide training to journalists to improve reporting of LGBTQI issues in the media. Now, about 4 years ago, the project undertook research into the representation of LGBTQI people and found that about 88% of any article, post, TV show, radio station that tackled gender and sexuality was incredibly negative, with less than 4% being positive, and the rest being somewhat neutral. And off the back of that, it was decided that in order to change this, the project would offer training sessions to Arabic-speaking journalists to change the language used around LGBTQI lives and experiences. This year, the grants, which was provided under Amplifund, went towards these training sessions with the objective of undertaking 2 to 3 sessions with journalists across the region. But of course, with COVID, these plans were disrupted. But I touched base with the project lead a couple of weeks ago, and they have been able to provide 2 training sessions. The first taking place at the very start of this year, which was actually a roundtable with senior journalists and editors, and the second that took place last month in Tunisia. So while typically the trainings work across the region, in order to circumvent the closing of borders due to the pandemic, the project has now begun undertaking national training sessions, so such is the case in Tunisia. And you know, over the years, as a result of all of these trainings, the project has actually established a growing network of journalists. And this year, they really sort of tapped into this network to provide webinars in relation to how the media is covering LGBT. I knew I was going to stumble at one point. I practiced so much to get this acronym out in one smooth go. But it was in relation to LGBT coverage during the pandemic. And also, actually, they did quite a few webinars around the impact of the blast in Beirut back in April, and how the LGBTQI community was organizing and responding to that. So really, really, you know, really important work. I can't stress that enough. And, you know, essentially the project it's really about communicating directly with the media. It's regularly calling it out in its use of language and the framing of LGBTQI lives and experiences. And for the rest of this year, the Arabic Media Project is actually going to be focusing on a newer piece of research, looking at LBT women in Iraq, conducting interviews and hopefully providing a training in the first quarter of next year, but hopefully. The second group is Pink Armenia. In early 2019, Armenia was actually ranked 47th out of 49 European countries for its protections of LGBTQI rights. That's just behind Russia and ahead of Turkey and Azerbaijan. Pink Armenia, which the Pink actually stands for Public Information and Need of Knowledge, is an advocacy organization that raises public awareness about sexual and reproductive health, HIV, and equal rights for LGBTQI people in Armenia. They publish information on a range of different topics with their goal really to demystify LGBTQI issues, raising awareness and promoting understanding within the community and among the general public. And so part of that is also providing training sessions to journalists to improve their reporting on LGBTQI people and lives. So in 2020, the grant went to support Pink's work. But again, Armenia was actually in one of the worst positions for a number of COVID infections and deaths very early on in the pandemic, and underwent an incredibly strict lockdown. Pink responded by continuing activities, but a big part of their work did become about humanitarian responses, like a lot of these organizations that have had to continue sort of providing support in terms of basic care packages, because people have lost jobs and income and sometimes their homes. Logistically, they decided to move to a smaller office because they could no longer have community gatherings, but they did continue to run their services with psychologists, counseling, and other meetings online. And this has continued throughout the year. And all of us now have a healthy subscription to Zoom and all of the other online platforms. But this, of course, it does come with restrictions, right? So for many LGBTQI individuals, it's incredibly difficult to access online spaces, actually. If you're living in a small apartment with homophobic family members, like, that's not going to be entirely possible, or even have access to a computer or the internet. So it's not as easy as just logging on. And in addition to that, actually exactly a month ago, on the 27th of September, the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan reignited and has now left over 100 people dead. And the executive director of Pink, Mamukon, I touched base with him recently. He described a truly terrible situation. On the one hand, Pink is continuing to provide humanitarian support to assist people because of the pandemic. But on top of that, they're also having to support displaced LGBTQI people because of what's going on. And then on the other hand, they have colleagues and friends who are on the front line and all of the worries that come with that. And on top of this, the LGBTQI community continues to receive homophobic abuse online and in person. So it's, to quote Mamukon, a truly difficult situation. But talk about resilience. Next month, they're actually going to be hosting their annual Rainbow Forum, which brings together LGBTQI participants, their parents, civil society, activists, artists, lawyers, health specialists, and, it brings them together. And this year, of course, it's virtual, but they've had over 150 people subscribe to attend. And when I did touch base with Mamukon recently, he pointed to one of the quote unquote positive sides of the pandemic, in that moving the forum virtually has meant that there's this huge Armenian diaspora that can now access this space for the first time for like a truly global conversation. So I think that was something I did want to lift from our conversations recently. I'm also conscious that I could keep going, but in terms of updates, that's kind of it from me. I'm going to pass it back to you, Tag. Look forward to any questions.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the updates. It's incredible to hear the level of detail, but also the actual, as you were talking about, the actual impact of the fund and what the partners are doing, especially in this year. Thank you again. So I wanted to bring in Amir now to the conversation, who's been sitting there smiling and nodding very patiently for the last 20 or so minutes. Amir Ashur is somebody that I met probably just over a year ago now, but we've grown to become, I think, hopefully good friends, I can say that, but also, of course, very good colleagues, the Amplifund, and someone that inspires me personally very much on a consistent basis. So welcome, Amir. Amir, I wanted to kind of start off by asking you to talk a little bit about yourself. You are the executive director of IraQueer. You have a huge amount of responsibility. Talk to us a little bit about yourself, and then also how you sort of balance the responsibility of the demands of your activism and also your own, personal life and well-being. And then I know we're going to speak a little bit about the media report as well.
Thank you, Tag. This is definitely a family event for me because everyone involved in this initiative are people that I really consider to be my friends and colleagues and a support system. So I'm very happy to be on this call, and I thank everyone who is watching. I think, in general, as an organization, we're also 5 years old, so the same age as JFLAG, I think. So we haven't been there for a very long time, but I think because the need is so huge and there are so many different problems in Iraq, when you look back at the last 5 years, you feel like it's been 50 years. We celebrated our 5th anniversary in March, and we actually have realized that through our online presence and in-person initiatives, especially our radio program, we have actually reached 1 million people in 5 years, which, could be worse. I think what's really important for us is that, like a lot of the other groups that are supported under this initiative, we work in extremely conservative and limiting environments, which is why we're relying a lot on things like the internet, radio, and just doing more education to raise awareness. Uh, but in general, I think what we've been able to do, especially under this grant, which I think is very special to this grant, and that's the fact that the support we get regarding the financial support is not restricted in the same way that other grants are. Since they give you, for example, the rule that 10% of that grant can be used for core support, when all the work we do is basically reliant on having teams, on having access to different things that are within the core support category. So that is something that is really giving us a huge breather. And even though this grant is not, some of it is used for specific things, but the largest part of it is used to pay for a couple of my colleagues, basically. If you list the activities that this grant is supporting, they're huge because it's everything my colleagues are doing, and that's a lot of things. But I think what's, because we're 2020, we cannot not talk about COVID-19. So some of the money actually we've been using to support another small grant that we got from another source to open a temporary safe house for LGBT plus individuals who were at that point forced to either quarantine with abusive families or in temporary homes where the host often threatened them that they either leave the house or they would out them to the police. So we've been able to provide a safe house for 3 months, I think, over the summer. Some of them relocated to two of our more permanent safe housing. The rest of them have been either forced to go back to live with their families or find alternative solutions. But this year has been extremely challenging, I think, for everyone, obviously, but I think it represented another layer of challenges that are faced by LGBT plus people. So on May 17th, for example, on International Day Against, I'll call it queerphobia because otherwise it will be a really long name. We have, the EU and the embassy of the EU in Iraq raised the rainbow flag. And that raised a lot of criticism by the political parties in Iraq. And the media has covered the issue more. And as a result of that, we have documented 9 killings of LGBT plus people and got reports of almost 40 killings. That we're not mentioning the threats and the violence, the other type of violence that's been faced by LGBT plus people. So this year we've actually produced or launched a media report. And in normal times, I would be handing out copies of this. And this, the cover of it, for example, is another thing that was supported by GAYTIMES. They were very generous and quick in getting us a really, I think is a very cool and attractive cover, and hopefully will make everyone on this call and elsewhere read it. Not only because of the cool cover, but also because of everything, all the horrific information that we've uncovered during the process of doing the research. So we took mainly 22 TV programs and analyzed them from different points of view. And Claire mentioned earlier how the media project in the Middle East had such an overwhelmingly negative coverage of LGBT plus people. And Iraq certainly, wanted to be one of the top countries for once in one thing, and that's in queerphobia, as 95% of the words that has been used to describe queer people has been negative. Words like sinners, like mentally ill, abnormal, terrorists, dangerous, all kinds of things that are used to actively brainwash the viewers, and that includes LGBT plus people. So actually 89% of LGBT plus people that we spoke to said that those TV programs have negatively impacted their self-perception, which directly is not only impacting those queer people, but also is impacting the queer movement as a whole, because the movement is consisting of people. And if people do not believe in themselves, they're not going to join movements, which means we're not going to go anywhere. So, out of the, I think, more than almost 800 minutes of those programs, I think the overwhelming majority of the time was dedicated to non-queer speakers who are religious leaders, political party members, other experts, and all of them were using these negative words, all of them saying that being queer is a mental illness, that it's a problem, we need to eradicate it from the society. So all kinds of things that are, again, telling the viewer that this is dangerous, and they kept using dangerous type of music, like spooky and horror movie kind of music, to convey their message that those people are dangerous, they're scary. And in the last 6 months before we published the report, so before June of this year, I think around 63% of the coverage took place in that time period. And in general, that was, obviously because as an organization and a movement, we're gaining a lot of visibility. But it's also because the international community in Iraq has been trying to be a bit more vocal through raising their rainbow flag, which, is a symbolic step to take, important nonetheless. But the problem was when the international community was pressured by Iraq, they have removed the post that they've published on social media, which emboldened the Iraqi government, thinking that if we can put enough pressure on those countries, basically, and they will cave, we can do the same against a small organization that has 5 employees, most of whom are part-time employees. So it's been a very challenging year for us. I think one of the most important for us that we've been trying to focus on is to remind the public, remind the Iraqi government and the international community of the fact that we are not asking for anything radical. In fact, we're asking for the most fundamental human right, which is the right to life. And the good thing is that after years of advocacy, the Iraqi government has actually recognized the right to life of LGBT plus people in a few submissions to the United Nations. The bad thing is not only that information does not reach Iraqis, actually the opposite of that information is conveyed to Iraqis, and that the Iraqi government denies the fact that they ever recognize the right to life of LGBT plus people. So I think, again, to tie it back to this grant, I think what's really important for us is that we as an organization do not work in a country where we can simply go to the government and say, hey, we're doing some human rights work, can you support us? Because they're the ones who are actively working against us. They're the ones who are, reinterpreting the law to, categorize us as criminals, as outlaws. So we are forced to rely on, grants and funders who are usually outside of Iraq, actually always outside of Iraq, usually in Europe and the US. So for us, this is not, oh, it's great, it's a great opportunity, we can take advantage of this grant. It's, if we don't have grants like this, we simply will be a volunteer-based organization, which I think, like a lot of volunteer-based organizations, will slowly disappear. I have a ton to say because it's 2020. You know, everyone has a ton to say, but I'm gonna leave some for the Q&A session.
Thank you. I mean, I'll ask you now, straight off that. I know that you've had the opportunity to be on local Iraqi television in certain different capacities. Some people who might be watching with us live today or viewing this later on demand will maybe recognize you. I know some of those clips were shared quite widely on social media this year. How was that experience, and how do you approach an opportunity like that to be on local television as somebody who is recognized as being LGBTQ and being out from Iraq?
Yeah, I think, you know, that kind of opportunity is both the most important opportunity and the most exhausting opportunity you can come across. If people haven't seen it, and if they want to watch it, it's on IraQueer's YouTube channel and with subtitles. And you will hear within, I think the interview was about 20 or 25 minutes, you'll hear a huge amount of hatred and violence being sent against us, against me in that specific case, but also as an organization and a movement. So I think there are two things that I think of personally before I go on such opportunities. One is that I've been working in the LGBT plus world for 11 years now. And I could guarantee you, you know, for example, just again, May of this year, I've received around 600 hate mail on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. So this is something that's just a normal day at the office type of occurrence. It's not that it changes or it just happens when I'm on TV. Obviously, it's a lot more when I'm on such a big TV channel in Iraq. And it was live. I think they published the link on social media, and within 2 hours, they had 1 million viewers. 2 minutes after they removed all the links from social media because they feared that it will reach too many people. Luckily, because we work in Iraq, we download everything and we re-uploaded it to the internet. The second thing that I think of is they always portray us as these irrational, crazy people who are attacking the values, etc. And I, you know, took a conscious decision to be as calm as I can be, to just think that I'm speaking to children really, because the level of ignorance that they have can only be compared to children, people who do not have the mental capacity to challenge themselves. So I can't be angry with children. So I made that active decision so people can watch on TV. You're saying that those people are irrational. Just watch the interview and you'll see who's being irrational. That being said, the psychological impact of these things, no matter how strong you are, no matter how long you work in this field, actually is never easier. And again, when I was finalizing, I finalized the media report myself and watched all these videos, again, almost 800 minutes of content. I watched each program at least 5 to 10 times to go through different elements for each run. So imagine about 8,000 minutes of hatred on repeat. You're being described as sinner, as a, you know, all the words that I've described. Even the strongest person will have a moment where you start to think, am I okay? Like, are these words accurate? Am I a sinner? Obviously, again, I'm a part of networks like this, and I've been trained by some of the best people, and I'm so lucky because I have a lot of supportive people around me. So they bring me back to life and to my normal self. But the vast majority of Iraqi queer people not only don't have access to those people, but actually are only surrounded by people who remind them of the same things.
Sure. Thank you, and thank you so much for giving us a very brief update, as you say, for what's happened over incredibly busy year and a busy 5 years, and of course longer for you individually. We've got just a few minutes left of this evening's session, and so I wanted to wrap up and just come up with a couple of questions, one for you each, if you don't mind us answering those, and then we'll draw this evening's session to a close. We've asked our GayTimes Plus members, who of course are supporting Amplifund through their memberships, to submit questions for you both, and the organisations, of course, that you're here speaking on behalf of today. Claire, I'm going to come to you first for a question for you and, of course, the work that you do at GiveOut, specifically around, as we've just been talking about, coronavirus and the impact. So could you just talk to us in, I guess, 60 seconds, if you can, 2 minutes, if what the impact of coronavirus has been, and of course, if there has been any positive impact of coronavirus, if there's been any sort of silver lining to obviously a completely devastating situation.
Yeah, thanks. I'll try and be as brief as possible, but like Amir said, 2020. I'd love to meet the person that's had a really good year, because who's that guy? But in terms of GiveOut's work, we've been working from home since the very beginning of March. We're going to continue to do so for the foreseeable. We're a really small, close team. We regularly check in, make space for each other on how things are going, and I think we really have a lovely executive director, Rupert, to thank for his support and the way he supports the team. But in terms of what we do, a big part of how we communicate with our supporters and donors and grant partners is through face-to-face interaction, like so many organizations. We host multiple fundraising events across the year, where we invite grant partners to speak about their work, and where supporters can hear about the movement, in their particular context, in their words, not through ours. And the pandemic has undeniably resulted in us having to rethink things, but ultimately adapt. That's the only thing that we could do, just adapt. And I think, to touch on something that Mamikon raised, we've actually hosted panels virtually with partners from across the world in conversation, and that wasn't something we were doing. And actually there is something very exciting about that adaptation, and having these really, really interesting in-depth conversations with people in very different contexts, and seeing those differences and similarities. Our response in terms of supporting grant partners was to launch the COVID-19 LGBTQI Solidarity Fund, to help organizations respond to the crisis, because we've heard that so many LGBTQI people are facing economic hardships and having to flee unsafe living situations. So we had a lot of ask for emergency support to kind of provide humanitarian care packages, such as hygiene and care, food, rent money, establishing safe houses, as well as online spaces. And under the fund, I think we've been able to support 10 groups in their response to the pandemic. In terms of positives, I will just close on this, I don't know if it's positive, but I do feel that there's this renewed sense of being politicized. I don't want to trust the echo chamber that I'm in, because that's failed me a couple of times, but I really do feel excited about what's to come in response to what's going on. Yeah.
No, second that. Thank you so much. Amir, just one last question we'll kind of squeeze in for you, and then we'll wrap up today. Within, of course, we talked a bit about your report, Biased Iraqi Media and the Spread of Anti-LGBT+ Rhetoric. And as you mentioned, we're able to support that. And you can actually, if you're interested, you can go to GayTimes and read a bit of a summary of the report, and learn more by searching Gay Times if you're interested after listening and watching today's session. I just wanted to ask, it was a question that came again from one of our members, was of course that report was talked about very widely here and in other countries. Do you know how it was received in Iraq itself?
Yes, so that's actually, again, one of the positives of this year, which, anything we can get. And that's a few of the media outlets in the MENA region and in Iraq have actually talked about this report, which in the last 5 years, again, within the content that we've been reviewing for the media report, there hasn't been much coverage from our point of view. So, outlets like Rudaw in Iraq and Diyallah and Middle East Eye, their Arabic side, all of them have talked about this report and how the media is negatively covering LGBT plus people. And with Rudaw, for example, specifically, which is more known in the Kurdish region, we've had a few collaborations where we wrote op-eds and contributed to some of the pieces that they've published themselves. For example, when one of the religious leaders in Iraq linked COVID-19 to homosexuality, saying that this is God's punishment to us. So I think this report is really, for us at least, a good baseline and a foundation to just show the media when they say we're not biased, that this is literally the name of the report, that you are biased, and that just because you start your TV program by saying we're going to be neutral doesn't mean that you're actually going to be neutral.
Sure. Yeah, and of course those actions and the way that people speak much louder than what they say that they're doing. I think lots of us
Absolutely.
in different territories are learning that, of course, in different political environments, especially right now. Thank you so much. I just wanted to say thank you again to Claire from GiveOut and Amir IraQueer for joining me today and joining us at Gay Times. I wanted to just finish off by saying that of course, any Gay Times Plus members who are enjoying watching this today or in future already support Amplifund by their membership dues every month and year, which is fantastic. If you do ever at any point want to donate more to the Amplifund initiative and the different organizations that we're supporting, you can do so. You can go to gaytimes.co.uk for more details. And we'll also be circulating via our various mailing lists ways that you can support directly if you wish to do so. We will be having more conversations over the coming months, both on Amplifund, but also what our partners are doing, because I think this has been a fantastic way to learn and listen about what our partners are doing actively around the world, especially in such a challenging year. And so I'm sure you'll all agree we want to hear more and learn more and be able to support more as both the Amplifund initiative grows and also Gay Times Plus as a way of supporting Amplifund grows over the coming months and years. So thank you again to Amir and Claire, and thank you for listening and for dialing in live. And of course, if you've been watching this later on, we hope you've enjoyed the last 45 minutes. So thank you, and we'll speak to you very soon.
Thanks, Tag. Thanks, Amir.
Bye.
Thank you all.